And we are back on Capitol tonight. Supporters of the Millionaires Tax are trying to disprove the argument that the tax is driving wealthy residents away from New York by looking at tax filings. Those are indeed public. Progressive groups say that the tax filings show the number of high earners actually increased the year that the PIT increase went into effect. Today's Siena poll shows that 72% of New Yorkers are indeed in favor of continuing this increase, but Governor Cuomo and Senate Republicans opposed this tax. They opposed putting it in the 2011 budget, and they opposed the call to increase it next year, or to continue it. Cuomo reiterated today that he thinks this would hurt New York's economy. Here with me to talk more about the effort to keep the tax is Ron Deutsch. He is of New Yorkers for Fiscal Fairness. Welcome.
Thanks.
When I say that people's tax filings are public, I don't mean their actual filings.
Right.
Okay, so explain to us what that means.
Well, there's a number of things. You know, we have the myth of the moving millionaire, right? I mean, because everybody from the governor to Senate Majority Leader Skelos like to talk about the fact that millionaires are going to flee New York State if we continue this surcharge.
Yep.
We would suggest the evidence is quite the contrary. And as a matter of fact, we did this in 2003 to 2005, where we had a temporary income tax surcharge in place, and we actually saw a 30% increase in the number of high-income filings that were filed with the New York State Department of Tax and Finance. So 2003 to 2005, we saw a growing number of wealthy people in New York, despite the fact that this surcharge was in place. Most recently, we also saw that this surcharge was put in place in 2009 through 2011. As of the jump from 2009 to 2010 was put forward by the Phoenix Marketing International, which does an annual state ranking of millionaires. And what they found was that there was about a 10% increase in net household worth between 2009 and 2010 for high-income households.
Okay,
so
hold on.
That's growing.
Yes, stop. So here's the thing. You're talking about millionaires,
right?
People who make $1 million or more a year. All right. The PIT increase actually started for individuals. The threshold was $250,000. It's actually pretty low, right? So,
well, we can debate whether or not $250,000 is low.
I personally consider it high.
Okay, right.
But for an individual,
I think the majority of
New
Yorkers would think that that's
well, yes,
high.
except if you're a family. And for families, I think it was $300,000.
$300,000, but that was a 1% increase from 6.85 to 7.85.
But in New York City, if you have a family of four and you're a single earner income, you know, you just have one person working and the other person is taking care of the kids maybe, or whatever they might be doing, $300,000 is not a lot of money, actually. It may not be poor. It's really not.
I would suggest that a lot of people in New York City would still say that $300,000 is an awful lot of money.
It's not a millionaire's tax, right?
Right.
So I guess this is a long wind-up to the question, which is, are you guys okay with what the Speaker is pushing now, which is a true millionaire's tax?
Yeah, you know, we're supportive of what the Speaker is pushing. What he's basically said is we need to continue the surcharge, but we need to bump up the threshold. So for incomes over $1 million per year, he would keep the top rate where it is now at 8.97%, which is the same as New Jersey's, mind you. And we support the Speaker on that notion. You know, we think that there should be progressive taxation in New York. What we're going to do is, as of December 31st, we're going to wind up giving a $5 billion tax cut to the wealthiest 3% or so of New Yorkers at the expense of everyone else. So, you know, if the Speaker wants $1 million threshold, and that's acceptable to people, certainly Senator Bonasek, a Republican from the Hudson Valley, has said that he would support that, a true millionaire's tax. So, you know, if that's, what they want to promote, we're happy to get behind that.
Okay. I don't see the incentive, though, for Governor Cuomo. I mean, based on the Siena poll, which I know was good for you guys, you considered it very positive because you have 70% of folks who are saying, yes, we actually think that the millionaire's tax is a good idea. They also say 71% says, and we think that Governor Cuomo is a great guy, very favorable. His job approval ratings actually bumped up slightly in the high 50s. So he's opposed to the millionaire's tax, and people still like him a lot. So I don't see what the...
It seems a bit inconsistent, I grant you that. But I think that the reality is that people out there support the notion of asking the wealthiest New Yorkers to pay a little bit more. And they certainly support not giving them a big tax cut at the end of this year. So, I mean, think about the fact that what's going on in New York State right now, right? We have flooding that's occurred. I mean, there are thousands of families whose lives are devastated. We have infrastructure that's crumbling, as we noticed from the comptroller's most recent report. We have teachers being laid off, schools hurting, overcrowded classrooms. I mean, I think if you look at all those things together and say, our choices are addressing those issues or giving a $5 billion tax cut to the wealthiest New Yorkers, I think people are going to side with us and say we need to address those issues. And I would say I agree with Senator Bonasek when he says that if anybody needs a tax cut right now, it's not millionaires and billionaires. It's property taxpayers who are struggling to pay their property taxes, or we need to adequately fund schools, which his plan would do as well. So, I think in looking at all of this in sum, our hope is that the governor, who says he's a progressive, but just a broke progressive, will come around on this issue, not continue to draw these lines in the sand, but realize this is what the people want.
Yeah, the governor this morning had a press conference, actually, around noon, had a press conference at the Capitol, and he said he likened his opposition to extending the millionaire's tax or bumping it up or continuing it, whatever you might say, with his father's opposition to the death penalty. And I don't believe that he was speaking about the moral imperative here. I think what he was saying was it was incredibly unpopular politically for the death penalty to, popular politically for the death penalty to be reinstated. And yet Mario Cuomo said no. And actually he lost to a guy who said that he wanted to reinstate the death penalty. It was George Pataki, and he did. We don't have it anymore, but it didn't last so long. Nevertheless, no one was actually ever killed either under it.
Right.
However,
well, I certainly wouldn't equate the $5 billion tax cut for the wealthiest New Yorkers with the death penalty. But I would say it is a moral issue none the same, right? We have the greatest income inequality of any state in the country right now. That's the biggest gap between those that earn the most and those that earn the least. So nationally, the top 1% controls 24% of the income. In New York State, the top 1% has 35% of all the income generated in our state. And in New York City, even more stark, the top 1% has 45% of the income. That's not sustainable in a civil society, and that's something that needs to be addressed, that fundamental unfairness of our system, and the fact that the wealthiest New Yorkers are doing exceptionally well when we have record unemployment, record hunger, record homelessness. The two need to be addressed.
You're actually, in some ways, not just trying to capitalize on the Siena poll, but also trying to capitalize on Occupy Wall Street. I mean, this is something that, we had Michael Kink was in here, and folks, and I know you've worked with him in the past,
sure.
Strong Economy for All. And their argument is what people are really angry about, and now not just down in Zuccotti Park, but all over the nation and all over the world. You had international protests over the weekend, some of them not so peaceful, but still, is that exactly what you say, this grand disparity. And yet, you have this sort of amorphous, not well organized situation. The Occupy Wall Streeters aren't calling for a millionaire's tax.
Right.
There's like a little disparity there. I mean, you guys are trying to piggyback on it, but that's not what they want.
Right. I don't know, I think they want a lot of things, and I think they want people to wake up and address the problems that we're facing right now about social and economic inequality, about corporations and corporate greed and the disparities between the wealthy and the poor. I think there's a lot of messages coming out of Occupy Wall Street and the Occupy movement, which is spreading like wildfire.
But just to be clear, we're not talking about wealth redistribution, right, which would be an extreme
I mean, a tax system inherently is wealth redistribution, but I think, what we're talking about is leveling the playing field, and people are frustrated. They see the direction our state, our nation, our economy is moving, and they're saying, wait a minute, let's put the brakes on this. Let's realize that there's a fundamental imbalance occurring right now, that the wealthy are doing extremely well and the poor are suffering. So that needs to be addressed.
The Speaker also said that he would not hold up the budget. And now it would be difficult for him to do so because he would essentially be choosing between holding up the budget for the millionaire's tax and a government shutdown, which I think would be enormously unpopular.
Right.
Do you agree with that approach? He says he'll push for it, but only up to a point. If the governor says no and Dean Skelos says no, which they have said up at this moment, we're not in budget season yet.
Right.
We're around the corner from it. You agree with that?
I think nobody wants to see a government shutdown, certainly, right? But I think the reality is we hope that legislators have the courage of their convictions on this particular issue. We hope that they'll listen to their constituents, of which 99% of them usually aren't affected by these income tax surcharges. And it's clear, from the polling today and past polling, this is what people want. They want millionaires and billionaires to pay their fair share. They don't want to see massive cuts to education and healthcare and other needed state services. So, you know, I'm hopeful that legislators are going to fight harder this year for this particular issue than they did last year. And I think we're going to give them as much help as we can.
Well, I'm sure we will have you back then. It is good to
so.
see you around Deutsch, though.
Thank you very much.